Well, yo ho ho and a bottle of rum to you all. Welcome back to another long play video where I am inking a piece commissioned from a friend of mine, Chris Comedies. We have already done the penciling, and now it is time to go ahead and get some actual line work done on this. So I'm very excited. I really like this piece. I like how the composition has turned out. I'm going to stop playing with my mic, and we're actually going to get into this. There we go. Okay. So right off the bat, I'm going to start outlining this big moon we've got here. And the idea here is this piece is, it has a lot more elements than some of the other pieces I've done. And that's on me, because I really wanted to make this as cinematic as possible, and as interesting and as fun as possible, because I really like this piece. I like, Chris Comedies. I like working with him, so I really wanted to, show off kind of the story that he had made in the Kraken video that was originally a Lego stop motion piece that he did. So in order to do that, we have this gigantic moon. And the thing with the moon is, it is both a source of light, but it also has shadows on it, because it is reflecting the light. But that reflection is off of, rough, textured, craters and valleys and all these other, lovely space rock textures. And so what I want to do is essentially find a way to show off those textures without pulling away from, or pulling any attention away from our main character or the tentacles from the Kraken he's fighting. So what I am going to do is kind of have a soft outline all about him, or all on the moon, and then on our main character we'll go ahead and outline with a slightly thicker pen. So this was done with a, I think, 02, and this is a 0.7. Different brands of pen, but most of them work. I like Micron pretty well, though. They're pretty easy to get and fairly cheap. But I don't like how often they seem to lose their juiciness. And I think that's primarily why I prefer using a dip pen overall. You never lose that sharpness or juiciness in the ink because you're always dipping into the ink. But for outlines like this, I'm fine with using the quote-unquote normal pens. I haven't edited these videos yet, so I'm seriously debating whether or not I should just put sea shanties, or maybe like accordion music or piratey kind of just music in the background. Because what I'm listening to in the background usually is like lo-fi or jazz or something, regardless of the theme. But I feel like for this video it would be probably kind of fun if we did that, so I don't know. If you are now listening to sea shanties and pirate music, then you know that I probably made the right decision. And if you aren't, then I probably couldn't find any. So I think it was the other day I was at a family gathering, and my cousins were there, and they actually didn't know that I draw comics or have a YouTube channel or anything. And so we're sitting around, we're playing, we're doing, what we do. They're like, they're younger. I don't know how old they are, maybe 9 or something. And so I've just picked up a pencil and a piece of paper and just started drawing because that's what I do, regardless of where I am. Especially at like large events where, I eat a lot and I get tired. To stay awake a lot of the times I'll just start drawing. And so I've got one on one side and one on the other, and I'm kind of explaining what I'm doing to them. Because I'm just drawing whatever comes to mind, and they wind up like filling in all the story, giving me all these imaginative ideas, and it was really, really special because it was neat to see that just free-flowing excitement and creativity that we often lose as we get older and more set in our ways as, professional, artists and writers of things. We don't want to, appear unprofessional or silly or even not take what we do seriously. But that wasn't the case, and it was such a fun experience and reminder of a simpler time in life. And we wound up drawing 2-3 pieces that were really, really fun. I have no pictures or any photographs of any kind or any evidence to show that, but sometimes that's for the best. As we just were there enjoying the moment. But I think what was funniest was the fact that as I was talking to them, I kind of had to swap how I talk. Because usually when I'm talking while I draw, I'm instructing or I'm just kind of talking about whatever. Like for YouTube. Well, with them, they aren't interested in all the stuff that I have to say about composition or motivation or whatever. So I just kind of talked about, it's like, yeah, if you add spikes to the sword, then, it generally looks cooler, or like, if you do that. And they were so fun to collaborate with because they would tell stories, they would come up with stuff for the guy. The kind of knight character we wound up drawing. And it's just, it's just something that's really, really fun and exciting and a fun memory, we'll say. And if you have, if you have younger siblings or family members or people in your life, I highly suggest creating with them and kind of letting that chaos, out. Because, we were there for a good hour or two, just hanging out and talking. I think this pirate flag might be my favorite part of this composition. And initially, I kept trying to make, those, traditional square or rectangle flags work. But every time I did, it just didn't look right. And I couldn't get it to, really flap in the wind the way that I wanted it to. I know that sounds silly because it's you're drawing it. You can make it flap in the wind any way that you want. I'm I know, but just in my mind, I couldn't get it to really work for me. And so I made this long pennant flag instead, which kind of breaks from what Chris had in the original animation, but I feel like it's because of its cool factor, we can let it slide. And plus, Chris hasn't brought up anything about it, so I feel like we're safe. You'll start to notice sometimes, though, I think it's this line here. Oh, maybe not, but sometimes you'll see like a small thin line in your line work with the, pens like this. If you start to see like something in the middle, that's usually like the nib drying out, and it means like your lines aren't going to be as juicy and not as full. They'll start to lose that pure that pure dark color, or the, if you're using colored inks, or that that outline that you want, the black color that you want from your work. So four. Yes, I have to count the fingers every time because I have messed it up. I have shipped work that had the wrong amount of fingers, and I will never live that down. Thankfully, I caught it, and I had sent it on a messaging board. I think it was on Discord, where I could delete the message, go in, fix the art, send the new message before they saw it. But I was so mad at myself. So I count the fingers every single time I draw hands or even ink hands. I'm that paranoid. I'm sure you can even see it if you watch my time-lapse videos, or like anytime I draw on camera without talking. And I think, yeah, for the most part, most of what will happen is I'll just, you'll see me stop after drawing a hand and be like, do that, and that's me counting. So there's a little Easter egg you can find in pretty much every single video that I've made. It's me counting the fingers. Unless it's something without fingers, I guess. Now this pen has done surprisingly well. I think I got this. Somebody dropped it in my classroom, and I could never find an owner for it. So I just took it for myself, as I do with most art supplies that people leave in my area without coming back to claim it after a few days. I don't know what it is, but drawing swords always freaks me out. In the sense that, like, if I get the blade wrong, it's just like, it's the most blaring mistake to me. It's like, I can get, like, proportions wrong, I can get, like, all these other things wrong, and I will be like, okay, I was like, I can talk myself out of hating the piece. I can be like, you did your best, you need to see yourself improving, and remember that, art's a journey and all that. And that's like, if I mess up a sword, I'm just like, you suck. Look at it and weep, knowing that you are a failure. And I don't know what that is. Like, they are kind of difficult if you're trying to, like, ink a blade that's perfectly straight, or tapers, kind of like this one. But it's like, yeah, it's one of those things that I definitely struggle with being okay with when I mess up inevitably. Alright, let's see. Haven't done the head yet. I'm hoping these videos are relaxing to people, and help people see that you can enjoy working. You don't always have to have your nose to the grindstone, but you can still be professional, and you can still work hard. I know I'm not the best professional example of art out there, for sure. I know that I've got plenty of flaws. recently, I think I talked a little bit about this maybe in the last video, but I noticed that my art is kind of slipping a little bit because of all the digital resources I've been using. That's not to say anything about digital art. I think digital art's great, but for me personally, and I'd say like it's probably good practice in general, working traditionally really forces, you know, myself to get better and think about what I'm doing rather than just throwing things at a wall or using, you know, a bunch of like 3D models or something like that to figure out my problems. I have to actually like work at what I want to do. And for me, like that's really important to be able to be that flexible, because it's not a situation where it's like, well, what if you can't use a computer? It's more of a situation of, you know, looking for quality. So like in my case, I think there is a big difference between my digital work and my traditional work. That's not always the case, but like that's something that like I've noticed that I don't quite know why that is the case, but I need to try to close that distance sometimes. And what I have found is if like I'm struggling digitally, what I will do is I will practice traditional, you know, fundamentals. Or I will take a break from digital for a while and I'll just paint with watercolor or gouache or something like that. And the good thing about that is not only does it slow down my process, because that in reality is why I do digital. It's because of the process is so much faster. Also, I love digital art. But it forces me to think more, and it's like, so even with like this piece where I'm kind of inking rather rapidly, a lot of my decisions have to be made, you know, in the moment and at that time. Otherwise, you know, I'm just going to be staring at a page for hours, and I don't want to do that. So instead, you know, I will take my time with a piece traditionally while simultaneously also having to make, you know, split-second decisions as I work. So, you know, for instance, like I may be working on a piece and I'm not sure where I want a certain like for this, it's like, you know, going through and the penciling stage, I try to make sure that I block out where I want the black fill to be. But when I actually sit down to ink, if I fill an area with, you know, pure black and then come back and I don't like it, there's nothing I can really do about that. So instead of, you know, while I take my time and I relax while I work and not try to stress, part of that also is just making a decision on the fly and getting used to that stress and getting used to those compositional decisions you have to make in traditional art. Because in digital art, you can make a decision 3 or 4 times and you can see a preview of that, or you can even, you know, completely change everything about your work. And I think like just in human minds in general, like with stuff that you can instantly alter, you're not going to be as careful with it. And when you're not as careful with it and you're not as mindful about the things that you're changing and the amount of alterations that you can do and the amount of influence that you have over your piece without really having any investment in it, is really, I think it's a little unhealthy. So I think it's important to, if you're working digitally, you know, get used to not using the undo key every now and then, or possibly, you know, remove the undo key altogether and work traditionally for a little while. and get used to having confidence in your decisions while also having that responsibility. And I feel like I muddled that all up, but oh well. This is possibly going to be my favorite part of the drawing. Like large shapes, large organic shapes with like a bunch of like bumpy texture and stuff. It's my cup of tea. I guarantee I'll obsess over it and this will take twice as long. But I wouldn't have done that if I had done this digitally. And I don't know what it is, but I get so much more impatient digitally. And I think it's just because I'm on a computer, I expect things to take less time. And that's not a good mentality to bring into artwork or drawing. Especially if it's a commission for somebody, so. Again, none of this is against digital art. Or for traditional art exclusively. I love traditional art. I love digital art. I use both of them differently for different projects. So it's not a anti this, pro that situation. It is more a you should use whatever you can to improve. And if it's you find that your traditional painting or maybe your traditional line work gets better after you work digitally for a little while, then you might be the opposite of me, and you can do that. But I generally find that in this era, a lot of artists have started with digital. I think back in, with my generation of artists, it was very different because, drawing tablets and stuff were a lot more expensive and difficult to get your hands on. Especially like just where I grew up and such. Or even like iPads and drawing programs weren't as good as they are now. But as things got better and as technology has kind of permeated the art world, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm very happy to see certain technologies, certainly not technologies that do rob the soul and joy out of actual art. AI. But when it comes to these new artists, they often will start, they'll have a very short time where they're working with a paper and pencil and these the older techniques. Nothing wrong with that, but I do think having that ability to sketch and having that ability to formulate ideas and compositions in your head or in a way that is more messy, and that's I think the sketchbooks and traditional art's biggest asset is the forgiveness that you get for not being perfect. Whereas digital art, so much of the time, I think there is a perfection that is just inherent to it. But I'm rambling on. You can see here the pen is starting to give out on me. It's like it'll make a nice line like that, and then every now and then it'll be a more dry line, and I am not excited about having to replace it. I'm about to go on a rather long flight, and I'd like to replace my pens before I do so. So maybe, again, this is better timing. So, maybe it's not all bad. Okay, I think all the outlines are done. Nice. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead, and I'm trying to decide if I want to do the moon first, or if I want to do the tentacles first, or if I want to do our hero first. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the moon first, because I think that would be the easiest to work with. So I'm gonna use a smaller nib. This is I think Maru nib or a school nib. I'm not sure. All I know is like it's used primarily to make straight lines and very consistent lines. So I'm gonna use this for a little bit. Don't know if I like it for this texture. Actually, I might swap it out. We'll see. But the idea is to make very, very light, lights and non-distracting textures and lights and shadows on this background here. I'm using stippling techniques. I'll be using some hatching as we get closer to certain areas to represent, you know, deeper valleys and whatnot. But I want it all to be very, very light as opposed to the line work that we're going to have in the foreground. So I'm making sure to do this separately. And at first when I was planning this out, I didn't know if I wanted to do the moon before or after the piece was done, but I knew I wanted it either to be the first thing or the last thing I did, just so I could have that contrast. And I think I like having it be the first thing, just because as I go in and I ink this, I can always add more ink, but I can't take away, and so I think that's a smart move on my part, and we'll see how that plays out. See if it bites me later. But I am still excited. I like this piece so far. It's been fun. It's been a delight working with Chris again. It's absolutely just such a joy. When it comes to hatching and shading kind of like this, you could blame Bernie Wrightson for that. I have his book, his illustrations for Frankenstein. So I guess it's not his book. I guess it's technically, you know, Mary Shelley's, and then he just illustrated it. But it was, I think, something that he did in the 80s. I might be wrong on that. But his hatching work is absolutely fantastic. I believe Thomas Cole was one of his inspirations. I could be wrong on that. But I know that his ink work greatly influenced me. It's something that I always love looking at and referencing as I work. even if like sometimes hatching is like not the way to go, I'll sometimes still find a way to incorporate it. Because I love the way that it looks. I love doing it. Even if I'm bad at it, I still just absolutely am drawn to that kind of, art style. I've seen some hatching begin to pop up, and just like in general, a lot more unique techniques for some comics and some manga recently. A lot of that is still digital, what's coming out, but I'm starting to see kind of almost like a bit of some of the older stuff start to come back to kind of break the mold a little bit. And that's always nice to see, especially like if it's a resurgence of something that you like. But yeah, I don't know what it is, but I think some people are just kind of tired of seeing the same old in comics. Which, I mean, there's plenty of things that I'm tired of seeing in comics. But I've never really disliked a comic because it was digital. I've known some comics that I've absolutely disliked because of the art style or just the poor quality of the art. But generally, it's like if I'm looking at something that the artist has worked on that has been, carefully thought out and well represents the story, and in general just isn't ugly, then yeah, it's a good piece of artwork in my opinion. Or at least wise, it doesn't detract. And that's the whole point of comic book art. It's like you want to convey the story as best you can. There's a comic I'm thinking of in particular, and I don't want to like bash any working artists out there. I definitely have respect for them and their craft, but there's a few out there that are just very poorly done, and unfortunately I think it is just a style choice that is holding those comics back. But it has nothing to do with digital or traditional or necessarily a certain way of drawing comics. I think it's more of just like looking at the style and looking at the characters and the story that they're trying to convey. It's just not well done, in my opinion. I don't think that they match. And that's really unfortunate, especially for the writers and the consumers of the comics as well, but everybody that worked on it. Now that's kind of where that comic is, and maybe they're proud of it still. Maybe I'm not. I know I'm not the judge of every comic, whether it's successful or not. In fact, I'm sure this comic will do fine. But it is still something that I don't like to see. I don't like to see a good story and a good character and an interesting concept kind of almost feels like a waste to have crummy art. Again, I'm not going to mention the comic. If you were to talk to me in person, I could tell you, but this is the internet. You don't want to destroy people or even spark fights, because there's really no point. There's absolutely no point. Were I able to talk to this artist, maybe I would bring up some of my critique, but only if that was something that was, conducive to them and their career. So, be nice. Because at the end of the day, again, the only thing that makes me special and anything that I do is the fact that or relatively special. Nothing really makes me special, but the fact that maybe my word is taken a little more seriously than others, the only reason is that I stuck a camera in front of my face. That's what you got to keep in mind with anybody and anybody that tells you anything on, the internet. Their only authority, generally speaking, in most cases, is they've got a camera on them. And that's it. Anybody can get a camera nowadays. I've had people ask me certain things or kind of challenge certain things that I've said and give me some grief about that. Not anything too bad. Obviously, it could always be worse. But I had somebody, bring something up, and I was just like, well, the thing is like I'm not a professional. The only thing that makes me, the only reason that any of this has even come up is just because I have a camera on me. If I were to just say this in a normal conversation, you could probably walk away and not care, but now that I've put a camera on me, suddenly, the expectation is everything you say will be accurate, but it's just a person, and people are always inaccurate and always wrong. Not always, but like in general, we forgive people when they're not 100%, accurate, or at least as we should. In today's society and culture, I mean, like, it seems like we're always on a witch hunt for the next lie, the next scandal, the next thing that we can sink our teeth in and point and laugh at, or just, feel fake, shallow emotions over. It's like, oh, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they did that. Yeah, well, I mean, you can, because you've done the same thing as some of these people that you're pointing at. Like, I hate hearing about Hollywood gossip and Hollywood news about like all this stuff. It's like, I can't believe he would divorce her. That's or I can't believe this happened or that happened. I'm like, yeah, but if you go down the street, there's like 10 times worse. The only reason you care is because these people have cameras on them. It's like, it's really not that significant. I think I might have screwed up. I don't like the amount of detail I'm seeing on the moon. I think I should have gone more minimalistic, and I think I'm either going to have to walk it back with whiteout, or can't tell. I don't mind this down here. This isn't that bad. But up here, this is bothering me a bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten up this a little bit. Some of the things we're seeing here, and then just like darken down here. And bump contrast. Because at worst, that will at least make some of the more detailed parts seem a little less detailed, and therefore give us a little bit more compositional forgiveness. I don't know. I do not know. Now, last time I did a moon, I did it with a brush. Sumi ink. So maybe... I'm trying to decide whether I actually think this is like screwed up or not. Because I don't hate it. I just don't know that I love it. I'm a little concerned with what direction I want to go with next. Because I don't want it to be too visually noisy. Alright, let's do the flag, and we'll see what that contrast looks like, because I think this is still salvageable. I don't think I've crossed any full lines here yet. I think I'm panicking a little bit, and I need to chill out. So I'm going to draw the flag. Because I feel like the flag will give me like a good idea of where we stand. From a contrast side of things. So here we're going to have some light hatches going up there, recognizing the wrinkles in the flag. In here we're going to go ahead and we're going to add the actual painting onto the skull and crossbones to the actual flag itself. So adding a drawing or a logo or an image within an image is always difficult, because you have to ask yourself, you know, at what points do we add the shading to the image and the shading from like the world that the image is in. So you just kind of have to balance your mediums. I know for, you know, a fact that this is going to be colored digitally. So I'm fine with some of this here because I know that, you know, if this eye that is also being intersected with this wrinkle happens to have an issue later, you know, with being seen, like it might be difficult to see, I can just go in digitally, and with the colors, I know that my I know that the design will be able to be seen because of the black and white and the colors that I'll be using. I'm trailing off a little bit. I don't know why. My mind is kind of wandering. I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again. When you are penciling, you want to make sure that you are addressing all of those problems that you don't want to think about when you're inking. And when you're inking, all you want to think about is putting down lines and putting down shades and thinking about lighting. You don't want to think about, oh, well, where does this go? Where does this go? Or is this, you know, the amount of fingers is the design I want. Is this the, no, that's all up to the past you. That's if you're doing the line work or the pencils. I'm sorry. If you're doing the pencils, you want to make sure to solve all of those problems before you get to a stage where you're making something permanent. There we go. You can't see it on camera, but when I go to clean off my pen nib, I'm just using this rag here. And it's a paper towel, and I wipe the excess ink out of the grooves and out of the middle of the pen, just so that when I go to get more ink, I'm not bringing any of the old crusty or dried ink along with it. I'm making sure that I have a fresh nib so that I can make those lines that I want to make without worrying about random dirt or dried ink or unnecessary texture that I don't want. Now, some people, they will use that to their advantage, and that's how I know that Bad Ink Studios, somebody I've talked very much about when it comes to when it comes to lettering, which I think they're very good letters. I think that I forget the artist's name, but she has a very, I hate to say messy approach to inking, but like her line work has like a lot of character, let's say, to where, if you look at her nib, I don't think she'll be offended by me saying, like, it is very uncleaned. And the nice thing about that is she gets these very, very textured lines and a lot of extra additional character in her work. And I think that really works for their project. I think, a bit more of a neat freak when it comes to some of my art supplies. Not that I don't keep messy nibs or old brushes around, because I certainly do. I just kind of prefer the way that, the hatching looks and the way that the clean line work looks a bit more. And I think that comes from the background that I have reading so much manga and getting used to seeing that very, very clean line work, but also the classical illustrators. But Bad Ink Studio also has some very nice artwork. And I know they've been recently, or recent to me, some of the videos or shorts they put out have been talking about colored inks, and I haven't really done any exploration into colored inks before. It's something that I've wanted to do. I just haven't taken the time to actually try it. I think I first heard about colored inks when I was painting miniatures, which is something I like a lot, and using an airbrush with some inks. And I don't know exactly how that would fare in an airbrush, if that would be easier to clean or harder or whatever. An airbrush is not one of those tools that you want to... It does not improve with griminess, unlike ink pens or brushes. It is not something you want to get messy at all, really. You want to keep it as clean as possible, especially the well. And so... Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to try some of that. See what they're talking about, because I think what they were really mentioning was the using it for like traditional kind of comic style coloring, and almost kind of like how you can layer in all of the different layers of colors, and they're very bright and colorful is how they're using them. But I'm curious if, like, for kind of more realistic work, how they would do. I think I'm gonna make this, yeah, either completely black or just like the center. I might just double down and make it all black. A solid fill. That's where this outline's really coming in handy. I'm basically just painting with my brush within the lines. You know what? I think I will go ahead and fill this in completely. Gennady Tartakovsky, the guy who he did work on Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, the old 2D animated Clone Wars, and one of my favorite animated shows, Primal. Has a way with he's got a way with using pitch black that I don't think a lot of people, use in their work, especially in animation, because generally, you want to see as much as you can on screen, but he kind of is almost a minimalist. I remember seeing a scene where they're out on this boat, and there's no stars in the sky, it's just pitch black. And the character's hair is also black, so his, most of his head is not seen in that whole scene, and it's okay. It honestly looks better because of the kind of minimalistic approach that he has. So I try to remind myself that, and I think he was inspired by like Mike Mignola and Hellboy So I also look at, Mike Mignola a lot, but that's something that I remember seeing in that show and remembering just the amount of pitch black that he uses in that you can use and use effectively in your own compositions. I feel like manga artists also, like, they're very, very good at seeing where they can use just pitch black rather than just absolutely, keeping everything hatched or shaded or using tone. Sometimes they black out a panel, and I love it when that happens. I love seeing that boldness. That's not to say that every panel needs to be just like splashed and festooned with ink, but at the same time, there is something about it that does bring out a lovely bit of contrast and emphasis to compositions. Something I wish I was a little better at. Here and just make a little bit of shadow. Touch there. I often go overboard, so I try to be. I'd say I succeed, but I try to rein it in a little bit while still having good shadow work. Shadow work sounds like a old 80s book by Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy, Shadow Work. A man finds a submarine that is carrying the pill to cure cancer, but it's owned by the Russians, so he must decide whether or not to cure cancer or to go on a large spy mission to kill Russians or something. I don't know. To be honest, I don't read Tom Clancy. Nothing against him, I haven't read any of his work. I've just seen his stuff in every bookstore I've ever been in. Always used bookstores, though. It's like, yeah, I like Barnes & Noble or whatever. Like, you'll see his stuff. He is probably a pretty good writer, but it always seems to be, like, the same kind of title and the same kind of subject matter, which, I mean, if you've got a niche, you've got a niche. It's been funny seeing the reactions some people have discovering what I do, discovering my YouTube channel and the fact that I draw comics and stuff like that. I had somebody the other night, their introduction to me was they just pointed at me while looking at, you know, their friend, and they're just like, he draws video game characters. Like, very, like, robotically. And it was just kind of funny. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I do. But, yeah, I don't know. It's something I'm not used to, even, because it's like, this isn't a full-time gig. I don't know that it ever will be. I'd love it if I could sit and draw fun monsters like this for a living, but the reality of that is hard to say. But I do enjoy it, and I do enjoy the things that it's brought to my life, and the things that it seems to bring to other people's life. The things that are positive or informative or relaxing or enjoyable. And I'm happy to occasionally get a little bit of recognition when people, like, he draws video game characters, or he writes comics, or, you know, that was the funnest thing. When my cousins, you know, I was like, yeah, when I'm drawing comics, and like, you draw comics? I'm like, yeah, I draw comics. Anybody can draw comics. So you don't have to be published. You can just make comics. And to see that, you know, kind of in their faces, that realization, that recognition, and hopefully maybe even inspiration, it's really special. It's really something that I know I didn't grow up with. I never met anybody that did what I wanted to do. So, to be able to be that to maybe somebody, or even just to be a interesting story in somebody's week, that's worth it for me. And you know, if it turns out I can't make as many videos in the future, or I can't, you know, continue doing this as regularly because I, you know, have to make money, I have to be able to pay bills, you know, and I can't pay bills because of this, then you know what, it's a good place to stop. It's a good place to be if I've encouraged people to draw, if I've inspired people by daring to try to chase something it's difficult to obtain. Sometimes we don't always get happy endings, but we can get satisfying ones. If we just understand where we are and who we are, and maybe what we need and what others need, maybe more than what we want or what we thought we needed. So I'm going ahead and I'm going to, oh dear. I'm going to work on these tentacles here. And the idea is I want to have these lower ones in the back kind of blacked out, but I don't want to fully commit yet. I want to add a little bit of texture to them and see if I like them more, like where it's this close hatching, where it's almost blacked out, or if I'm going to go ahead and just pull out the brush and just leave them as a shape. So I think either way the composition will look good, but maybe I'll like one over the other. You'll notice all I'm doing is just going back and forth with the pencil, or the pen, sorry. And it's a lot like scribbling, but you want to learn how to control like the distance between your lines, even when you're doing something like this, so that you can imply where shading is and where light is. And you can learn this by practicing with a ballpoint pen. Obviously, it's like if you want to get good at using a dip pen, you should use a dip pen, you know, practice with the tool that you're going to be using. But using a ballpoint pen is also a great way to get used to thinking about how to shade when you can't use a soft pencil and a soft texture like that. I like this, but it's almost too much like a tree. So I'm going to increase the shading a little bit here with some cross hatching. Just to see if that does what I want. Doesn't look like it does, so I'll probably wind up blacking that out. For now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish up some of this stuff I've got up here with the kind of seaweed-ridden barnacle and just ocean gunk on the upper tentacles over here. So we really want to keep in mind that we've got shading on this side and on this side because this is a round cylinder. And what I'm noticing is when I add this shading as cross-hatching, it almost gives it a like a gross texture, like almost like it's, I don't know, like too fleshy. It looks like zombie flesh right now. So what I might do is I'll go in and I'll make these kind of designs with the texture, and then I'll add like a harder yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll add a harder lined fill right here. I don't mind the zombie flesh look, but I don't think it'll work for like a Kraken, which is essentially what we're going for here. We're trying to make like a Kraken's tentacles, and I don't want to make it a zombie Kraken for the moment. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to add in this solid black fill to kind of give it a little bit more shininess and a little bit more shading that maybe appears a little less textured. Because originally when I was penciling this out, I did not want the tentacles to just be like kind of essentially long, you know, just unbroken cylinders like worms. I wanted them to actually sort of have a bit of texture and detail in them. Now I'm kind of seeing that like they're maybe a little too textured. So, you know, it's a push and it's a pull. It's a give and it's a take. You do what you gotta do. If you're like me and you like to jump around, you want to make sure that you keep up with all the parts. So like, as like I work, I'm being influenced by like what other textures are in the piece already. So here I'm going ahead and I'm filling in this texture because I know that like if I fill in this texture and then this is, you know, crosshatch down here, I might just unintentionally work based on how I like this down here, but it might not be the effect that I want, or maybe, you know, it's the opposite effect. It's something that I dislike down here, so I'm overcorrecting on these up here. When in reality, I've just jumped, and I haven't finished it yet. So it's not in a stage where I can... I should be influenced, I should say. And it's not in a stage that I need to see it in yet. Where I can decide whether or not I want it to be the way that I want it to be. So that's cool. I think in order for this to succeed as a piece, I have to stop trying to hatch everything. And that's going to be difficult. Yeah, because like for emphasis up here with the sword, I feel like if this was majoritively black or all black up here, that would really make it pop. Rather than if I were to shade everything with hatching. So I must needs get over it and actually just bite the bullet a little bit here. Oh no, he said bullet. I don't give a crap. I watched a video recently, and I understand there's probably something for monetization, like where like in formal YouTube language they give you a list of words that you cannot say or something like that. It was my understanding that that was a TikTok thing. I don't believe it's a YouTube thing. Even if it is, I don't think that's something I could ever... Like, I don't come out on my channel and just say, you know, the words suicide or kill or gun or whatever like that, generally. But at the same time, when I'm watching a crime, like a video about a crime or something that has happened, and it's like, it's understood that these things are going to be talked about, when someone's like, they unalived themselves, I'm like, oh my word. It drives me up a wall. It completely drives me up a wall. Because it's, you know, I'm not going to get political, but like, it is against the freedom of speech. It's like, it's your video, you can say whatever the heck you want. And generally for me, like, it also just sounds stupid. Because like, they had brought up, I saw another one, and they were talking about the movie Suicide Squad. And they were like, how did they say it? It was really dumb. Or they bleeped themselves as out. I forget what it was, but like, it's like the unaliving squad, and I was like, oh my word, are you serious? There's a point where it's too far, because it's like, that's the name of the movie. It's the name of the team. It's the whole point. Like, you can talk about all the, you know, raunchy, terrible things that Suicide Squad does in the, you know, entire video, but you can't bring up, oh, you know, their name. What the heck? It's so dumb. That's my soapbox for today. One of many. I have a small investment in soapboxes being constantly shipped to these videos where I can stand on them and rant as much as I want, but it's... yeah. Alright. So, now we've got that taken care of. We can go ahead, kind of mark where I'm going to add the rest of the fill here. And I might as well add it now. I've kind of swapped in an effort to keep myself from hatching. I've swapped from a pen over to a brush. Just trying to just keep myself from just hatching the absolute daylights out of this. But it's kind of agony. It's tough because I do really enjoy working with those textures and those kind of lines, but that's just not what's gonna be conducive, so I have to steady myself. And it's also good practice because now I have to think in like terms of light and color and where things will look good. Because while hatching does look good in a lot of scenarios, it is also true that you do not want You don't want your preferences of technique essentially to rob from the results. So for me, I think if I hatched all of this, it would rob from the results too much, and I wouldn't get the piece that I'm happy with and that the client would be happy with. So I have to set aside my personal enjoyment of hatching, and I can save that for another piece or another day on my own time. And I have to think about what's good for this piece and what's good for the customer. So when I'm doing this, I'm kind of thinking of like a hose wrapped in maybe like a rubber or maybe like a very tight latex material or something like that. But I also want to keep in mind, it's like this will be colored. So it's like, wow, we have these kind of lines going back and forth showing how the kind of rubbery material, which would be the skin of the Kraken, being stretched across these parts. We also want to keep in mind like that there will be, you know, a point where I have to paint those, and some of that can be some of that form can be expressed not exclusively by ink but also by the color. But that looks pretty daggone good, so I think I'm going to leave it alone as I touch it up more. Alright. So let's go down here. Do a bit more work. And all I'm doing to achieve this texture is kind of just going in with the very tip of my pen and just kind of back and forth. These little lines, just letting the tip kind of flick out like that. Kind of towards the other side and making sure that it's matched on the other side. So we kind of have like a back and forth. Just show the bends and the tiny creases of the piece. And if it doesn't look right, I'll usually just thicken it up or try to thin it out as we go. So like here, I kind of thin out these little lines while I'm thickening out like this side, kind of to show the bend in the material, while also being interrupted by some of those gnarly... I imagine this is some sort of slime. I know I put it on there, but sometimes I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be. Fully, I just know that the texture looks good. Probably not a great thing. I should probably know a little bit more about why I'm putting what I'm putting on there, but you know. Alright, so that does not look bad. I did notice something up here, though, that I'd like to address, which is the kind of lack of shadow right here, so... There we go. Like it better. Alright, cool. So... let's go ahead and... It never fails. I always get texted. I get texted by people every time I sit down to draw. And usually I can ignore them, but usually it's people that like I never hear from normally. Like, or I've sent them something and then it's like I have to wait usually, you know, a while for them to respond back. But as soon as I turn on camera and start drawing and making progress, that's when I get texted. or emails or calls. I've had full-on Zoom meetings before where like I have to use the camera like where it is now. Usually it's over there with my computer monitor, but I've had to stop what I was doing immediately because I got a Zoom, an important Zoom meeting or something pop up, and so I just have to pretend like, oh, did we interrupt you? I'm like, no, everything's fine. And there's like a great big piece of artwork that I'm working on off screen that they can't see. Although I've had meetings sometimes where they'll go a little bit longer than my attention span, and or like maybe it's a situation where it's a little more casual, so I will just start drawing. And there's been a couple of times where I'll just turn on the camera and I'll let them watch while I work. That's usually with like meetings with people that I'm a little more familiar with. I usually don't just like, hey boss, watch this while you talk about, financial stuff. You're fired. Cool. I'm gonna finish this drawing while you tell me I'm no longer working for you. So you're thickening up these lines where I don't want the hatching or the back and forth motion of my my brush to really show through, because it doesn't need to. And you just get used to making those decisions. I can't like fully explain how I know when I want a solid shape and when I want a more wobbly shape, but generally it comes down to observation and what I've seen before and what I've enjoyed looking at before in other comics. So like here I'm kind of giving myself like a large flat area, but like only a little bit of light, so it makes it seem a little bit more shiny and wet. But then down here I'm working around all these other shapes, so I want to add a little bit more light so it makes sense as to like where these shapes are going to be, like these different tendrils and sea junk. I still don't know what I would call these, like I guess just like seaweed or sea scatter, sea debris. It's sea debris now. Sea debris. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, but I'll say sorry anyway, if it makes you feel better. Alright. That doesn't look bad. I thought I beefed it. I have yet to beef it on this. That makes me feel really confident. Nice. Alright. Let's do this tentacle, and then we're done with tentacles, and I can draw the guy, and the guy won't be that hard. It's awesome! Yes! Aren't you glad you get to watch me pep talk myself while I work? And that's not something I do exclusively on camera. That's how I work. You're getting the real me, unfortunately. I need to get more brush pens. I was trying to like lean off of them for so long, like, or find a way to kind of scale back because I was using them too much. But now that like I have working on this for a while, I'm like, nope, I like them. Bring them back, please. This is starting to make that moon look a lot better. Maybe it would have been better if I started with the tentacles and then did the moon. Would have had maybe more confidence. Oh, but then again, maybe I wouldn't have worked as hard on the tentacles and been willing to apply so much ink. Who knows? It's worked out, so I'll take it. The difficult part about using a brush. Let me ensure that I'm actually on camera here. I am. Okay, good. Difficult part about actually using a brush is that you have to monitor how much ink you are actually using. Because not just like for splotches, but like as you work, you will begin to lose ink. And if you're going for like a certain style where that's okay, but like you want to have some dry brush and you want to have like not solid black, that's fine. For me, I generally want just solid black. I don't really want to have that brushy texture for this piece. I've had it before, I love it. Don't think it would work for the texture that I'm going for here. So in the name of consistency, I'm monitoring that extra close and making sure to dip often with my brush to get fresh ink so that I don't accidentally put less ink in an area where I definitely need it to be solid. There we go. And again, I'm thinking of like this round movement as we go. Again, thinking about like a tube with probably like latex or rubber around it. I think this actually works though, because like I think the Kraken in the video was they used black, or Chris used black bricks for that. Yeah, I think it was. And then he had like red suction cups. Well, aren't I just on brand then? I meant to do it like this. I mean, I did eventually, but, you know. Don't worry about it. On the subject of using ink, also, like, for these thin lines, you want to make sure that, like, you have the appropriate amount of ink, because if you saturate the brush, you won't be able to turn it to where you have, like, a point with the bristles. Because essentially with brushes, you kind of have, like, the main body, and then you also have, like, the point, which should be right in the center, but as you use your brush more and more, that might move to where you are using the side of the brush more, which is like, it's a round brush. I'm like, yeah, but there are still sides to it. There's like the sharp end, and then there's the end that's maybe a little bit more round. Or a little less, more blunt, let's put it that way. There we go. Alright, let's draw those veins and then I can shade. And off camera, I'm cleaning it with a bit of water and then using the same moistened paper towel to wipe off the brush. There we go. Swap back over to G pen. And we're going to go ahead and... There's a hair on my G pen. I hate that. We're going to go ahead and add in the sea debris. There we go. So stylistically, we're letting these areas remain like really be untouched by the shading that we're adding to the rest of the tentacles. But like you'll see here, as this kind of curves around here, and we have this shadow, this contact shadow here. I am letting that go ahead and be overtaken by where the shading is. Mostly because I can't really do anything about it, and secondly, like, I think it's fine for the rules to be broken right there. So when I'm doing these organic, the sea debris, as we have dubbed it. When I'm doing this, you'll notice that like I kind of lift my pen mid-stroke sometimes. That just gives it a little extra noise. And a little bit more of like a hint at the texture. So, you know, instead of going in and really trying to shade all the little bits and pieces and all of that, and using like a lot of dots or a lot of lines to show, you know, what the stuff is made of, by giving it a texture kind of in just the line work, you can really save some time. And also, like, it gets the point across a lot better, I feel like, than if you are to just really just drape the thing in details. Just by using like simple broken up lines and these wavy kind of natural textures. Okay. We gotta make our way around here. Alright. Can't tell if it's my hand or the pen that's flaking out on me. It's probably my hand. It's alright, I'll probably have a break in a little bit. Ah yes, 15 minutes till my break. Won't feel like anything to you because you're watching the full video. Hopefully all the way through. What does this make me think of? It's making me think of something. Oh, it's the flood. It's making me think of the flood from Halo. That's what this is. I've just made the flood. Oh my goodness. That stuff is gross. For those of you who don't know, if you've never played Halo Combat Evolved, or I guess it's in Halo 3 as well, the flood is basically space cancer. But it's sentient, so like it goes around and it just devours everything into like its hive mind. And it was this terrible thing that affected the universe, so they created the Halo rings to destroy all of it and get rid of it, and the Halo rings became like, a religious symbol to this one alien race. And so they started kind of doing like a bunch of wars and stuff to get control of the Halo rings, because they thought once they were activated then it'd be cool. But in reality the Halo rings are basically just Death Stars that blow up galaxies and stuff once they're turned on. So the humans and a lot of the other parts of the galaxy are like, no, don't do that, we don't like that. And so they made super soldiers to fight it. Meanwhile, Space Cancer doesn't care. Space Cancer, also known as the Flood, just wants to take over the entirety of everything. So like on some of the because like the Halo rings were meant to destroy it all, but it didn't destroy all of Space Cancer, so Space Cancer's still around, and it looks like this, except for its rotting flesh and other nastiness and large tentacles, and it's gross and I hate it. case you couldn't tell, I was playing a lot of Halo in college. That was the game of choice that we would play. We would bask in the nostalgia of simpler times. You gotta love my like monotone, uninterested delivery of the entire Halo like lore. Not the entire Halo lore, but like a decent bit of it, I guess. Like the intro. So here I'm kind of just inventing shapes and hunks of garbage to interrupt the pattern and give an idea of what maybe these little dots and these little curves and these tiny little details are all across the rest of the composition. So by only having one detailed area and then just hinting at that detailed area throughout the rest of the drawing, we now have a detailed drawing, even though in reality it's like a lazy drawing with only one area where we really worked hard. But no one needs to know that. It's fine. I immediately abandoned the area that I was working on to work on the suction cups because I totally forgot about them. There we go. Alright, cool. Little bit more space cancer texture. Except it's not space cancer. It is a gigantic kraken. Alright. Bring me the brush. Alright. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Oh no, copyright. Archbox will come for me. I used to listen to them all the time. Especially when I was drawing, because it's like, if it's like electronic and it's like super repetitive, you really like it and you're already in the zone, you're not gonna notice it. So like there's a lot of music that's like, I listen to it now, like in the car, and it's like, this is not as good as I remembered it, but I have to remind myself, it's like, yeah, well, I was working, so I wasn't really listening. You can see that fuzzy edge there from the brush drying out. It's not what I want. Needs to be crisp. So apply more ink. So in the areas here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have more bigger shapes like that. So I'm just going to put more pressure. Instead of using the edge of the brush, I'm using the whole brush to deliver the ink to the page and give more of that texture that we're seeing throughout. Since it's more up close, we're going to need bigger shapes. Which is going to use more ink and mean I'm going to have to dip more, and I dip too much. Now the metal part, which name I used to know, is going to be completely doused in ink. Lovely. Nice, nice, nice. Oh. Yeah, coloring this isn't going to be a nightmare. No, to be honest, I think coloring it will be fun. There'll be a lot of fun implied texture that I can just use flat color on without having to really go overboard. That way, we'll have like a fairly simple color scheme, but because of the shading it'll look more complicated. Well, this was hopefully it will. Every time I do a videos, like a long play video like this, I always wind up like, I'll be super chatty at the beginning, or like even the penciling video, I'll talk the entire time, and then I come to like the inking video, and I will chat, I will be like kind of like, you know, yeah, we're doing this, whatever, I'll be silly, and then like I'll start inking, and I'm just like, dead silent. And if it's awkward for you, it's twice as awkward for me, as I like come up for air and like realize, oh, there's a camera there and there's a camera here, there's a oh just like, okay, maybe I should talk about something, and then I like have to scramble in my mind for like, what was I talking about before? Did I leave off anything, or do I need to start a new topic? What's a good topic? Birds is cool, right? So yeah, using a dangerously large brush for this next bit. I don't have as much confidence with this brush, but I need more ink. Stop singing on camera, it's not that kind of channel. Right. I just felt my finger go into the ink, so I'm going to lift it up very slowly. Nice! No smudging, just ink on my hands, which is fairly common for me. Gotta rub it off. Or rub it in, I guess. It's just there now. Ah, well. I liked having a hand, and now it's been taken by the ink. Nothing I can do except wash my hands, but psh, we all know that's a farce. Hand washing is such a big thing. It's invented by the water companies to make you use more water. I truly hope that's not the belief of somebody. If you don't, please wash your hands. I immediately thought of like all the terrible things I've heard that are just like, yeah, if you just wash your hands, like it gets rid of this disease completely. I'm like, yeah, it's rather important. Very nice, very nice. Don't put your hands in the wedding. And it's everywhere. Yes, I do this constantly. I will talk and sing to myself about what I should and shouldn't do. I don't know why, I just do, so I'm sorry. But this is what happens sometimes when I film myself. Generally, it's just a stage where I'm like, you know, I don't, like, I just kind of, I'm just like, okay, this is what the piece is now. And I have to live with that. But this is, like, genuinely bringing much joy. I'm gonna walk away and I'm gonna come back and it's literally just gonna be like crap. Like, that's the thing. If you like it while you're sitting there and you're working on it, generally, like, when you come back, which is like what I do, that's partially why I take breaks, you'll come back and you'll hate it. You'll see a ton of things wrong with it. I've thankfully also had the opposite happen, where, like, something's crap, you leave, you come back, and you're like, oh, shoot, it's not that bad. So that's why breaks are important. Helps you reset. Helps you reset, helps you see that, like, maybe you're not as big as a failure as you thought you were a few seconds ago. Because it's the thing, that it can only be a few minutes, and, like, your opinion will change. Especially when it comes to inking. It can all go to crap so quickly. I feel like that should be on a t-shirt. Just like with a large splotchy mess. It's just like, it's a great drawing, and then there's just like a splotchy mess with like a fingerprint. It's like, inking, it can all go to crap so quickly. I need to sign that. So don't steal my idea. So now here comes the fun part, where I look at this and I try to figure out where I need to simplify and where it's fine to be this complicated. And I'm beginning to think that I think it's fine that it's this complicated. It's very texture heavy, which I'm fine with for the most part. I might go in and I might kind of do what I'm doing now and thickening up some of these lines to kind of cut down and simplify a little bit. But I might also leave a good bit of it. And the reason that the reason you don't want to have too many details is, like, people won't look at it if it's too visually noisy. I know it's like, it's super, like, tempting, especially for young artists that think details are just the best, and as they get more and more skill, you know, you think, oh sweet, I can do more things, I can add more details, I can, you know, you get that confidence, and that's great, but you don't want to overwhelm your viewers. So there's a time for details, and there's a time for just, like, large areas of rest for the eyes. So, like, up here, I'm adding a little bit more of a rest area for these shapes. I need to go in with white out and get this curve back. So that's something I'm already seeing that could be addressed. Very nice, very nice. This is the part where I'm silently whispering to myself, don't get greedy. As soon as you get greedy, as soon as you start just going in, generally for me, I'll just start, you know, adding more and more detail, and then it just turns into a mess. You don't want it to turn into a mess, you want it to look nice. So I just need to show a little restraint with the inking. I say as I slap more gallons of ink onto this thing. Doesn't look bad. I think it's a good place for me to take a quick break. Which I shouldn't have addressed it. I should have just clipped it here and then moved on, but it's fine. Whatever. But I kind of like it. Alright. Very good. Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and we're going to get this character inked in. Hopefully we'll be able to get it all finished today. That would be the dream. First I gotta actually clean this nib, because I didn't do it last time. Don't be like me, children. Always clean your inking nibs so that they do not stop and clog the ink from coming down the little metal prongs and onto your great masterpiece, or causing any other problems, unless of course you want a messy drawing. You can have a messy drawing if you want, I suppose. And there's your German inking instructor, I guess. I don't know where that came from. Again, if this camera wasn't here, I probably would still talk to myself like this. So there we go. Basically at this point all we're doing is completing the inside shapes and going ahead with the shading. Now initially I'm not too worried about the shading as I just kind of block in these shapes. But there are some areas that I know, like right here, where there's going to be a decent amount of ink going down, so you might as well just kind of block in that as well. Same deal here. Kind of just blocking in where that's going to go. Cool thing about pirates is they really kind of, you know, exist in a lot of different cultures. So you have a lot of different versions of pirates. Beyond just the normal swashbuckler with a big hat and a skull and crossbones, or a great big cutlass. And that's, I think, kind of the fun thing, because like I drew a pirate kind of like that last video or next video, I don't know, again, whenever that comes out versus whenever this comes out. And the differences could not be any more distinct between these guys. Now, in general, they kind of have some similarities. I mean, you're never not going to have a pirate that's, well, I should be careful to say that. Anytime you say, well, you'd never have this and call that a pirate, and then like One Piece or any series where they do pirates all the time, it's gonna show up and just immediately prove you wrong. My nib is acting up. I don't know why. I can't tell if there's gunk on there or if it's just me. I might need some fresh ink in my well. Sometimes that helps. So there we go with that. So I kind of like more graphic shapes and more comic book style drawings when it comes to my work. So I'm okay with kind of making those more, like I said, graphic shapes and these more hard-edged drawings of my lines. I've seen some comics, I think it's primarily French comics, like that were influenced by Moby and Jean Girard, which I think Moby's name is Jean Girard. It's not two different people. They've got like a lot more soft edge to them, if I could say, like almost like what you would see for, I don't know, like some illustration work, but I feel like that's kind of discounting. Like it makes me think of like what you would see maybe on some of those old classic postcards. That you know, that you'd see at like, you know, gas stations in the 50s, where they've got like a little bit of line work in there, sometimes in the paintings, but not so much. Not so much as hard line as the American comics and the Japanese manga that I'm thinking of, but I know a lot of people attribute their work to Moby. I like his stuff. I think for me, my work is a little bit more influenced by maybe the themes, like the sci-fi drawings and illustrations, than maybe his techniques. But that's just because I've never sat down and actually studied his stuff in depth. And I could probably change that for sure. I'd have no problem with that. It's just, I think you can learn something from any artist, even if it's, well, this guy isn't my preference. In Jean Girard's case, I think I would like to learn how he picks colors and how he made those illustrations that were very, very, like, vividly that brand of sci-fi for that time. Like, you look at that and then you look at, like, almost every heavy metal magazine cover after he started making illustrations, and a lot of descriptions of, you know, the wastelands and stuff like that of the future, of the distant future of 2001. You know, that was, you know, it felt like Jean Girard's work, or if not, it was directly referencing his work. I know Nazca in the Valley of the Wind, a very good movie, one that I like a lot, references quite a bit of Moby's work. I think I'm running out of ink, and that's what's happening, so I'm not dipping as much, so it's drying out on my pen, so I might refill it after I finish up these stripes. I'll try to do it on camera somehow, just for a challenge. Let's get some more ink in my well. Now, for me, I'm not too picky about how much ink is in my well. I don't know if you can see that or not. But for me, I like to just be able to dip down without having to reach too far in there. So I keep one of these on hand, and I just fill it up to just about where the well begins to turn into where the cap would go. See if I can get that on camera. It's about there. I make sure to try to turn it so that I don't spread ink everywhere. And an important step that I've learned, let me put that ink away very carefully, is to make sure to wipe the top here so that you don't have you can see where I haven't before, and it's formed this sticky residue that makes it hard to open this cap. So make sure, like with your syrup bottle, if you're a decent human being, you'll do what, good people do, and that's make sure to wipe the cap of your syrup bottle with a paper towel. I don't know why. I'm not picky about a lot of things, but I have found recently syrup is one of my triggers. I love syrup. I love pancakes. I love eating pancakes with a lot of syrup on it, but I cannot stand how sticky and annoying syrup can be. So I'm very cautious when I bring out the syrup and I spread it around. I often, just to be nice, I take the plates of, the other people that are sitting with me at the table, like at breakfast or whatever, and we were having pancakes once. And my younger sister just kind of tossed her napkin onto her plate. And it's a disposable napkin, so I didn't have to completely cold cock her. But there's your southern word for the day. For those of you who don't know, cold cocking is when your mom comes up behind you and just hits you a good one right upside the head. No, I had, I don't know why, just a visceral reaction when I had to peel that napkin off of her plate to throw the plate with the dishes. I don't know why, but I hate that syrupy gross texture. I don't know what it is. It's just, I don't like it, but I'm fine with it on my pancakes. I'm fine, eating it or using it as an ingredient. So it's probably more than what you need to know about me, but there you go anyway. So you can see already that new ink, the clean nib, was already helping me make a lot better lines. I'm not having to fight my pen as much. So there's a lesson in that. You can often breathe new life into your quote unquote pen just by replacing some of the ink in your well. Especially if your well's been sitting out for a while. I believe there's some conditions of the weather that will also affect your ink, even if you are working inside. I am not aware of those. I should probably look it up. But I would imagine that it would be a little more harder to use if it was cold, as opposed to when it was warm. It might be more runny. But that is complete and total conjecture. I don't know if that's a thing or not. I kind of want to look it up. I like looking up facts about my art supplies that have nothing to do with what I'm doing. Like when I was working with, with watercolor, I looked up all kinds of different ways that they made watercolor and all the different, things that they would use watercolor for. Or when I was working with gouache, I would look up other artists and see what they did with gouache. And I remember when I was taking history of art and we learned about egg tempera, which is a method of oil painting where you use the I believe it's the whites of the eggs for your as a part of your medium for oil painting. And I wondered if they had done that, the starving artists back then had done that basically to help feed themselves while also, working on their artwork. I can never find a straight answer on that one. Because, I guess my thought was, if you're an artist and you're struggling to make ends meet, So you got to paint, but you also got to eat. Then you paint with what you've got left over. So you eat the yellow part of the egg and use the egg whites to paint. But again, I've got no proof of that. It's just conjecture on my part. So I do know a bit about ink. And what I know is, I don't know about this particular ink as far as India ink goes, as much as I do about other inks. But one of the things I know is to make ink, you have to essentially use kind of like a charcoal from, if I remember correctly, this one type of tree. I forget the tree's name. I say I know all this stuff about this, and then I immediately be like, well, I forget how this or that or whether. Bear with me. But essentially you take that and then you through various different processes for various different inks. The one that I've seen is essentially you remake it into this stick, and this is for Japanese ink, I've noted, and it's like this solid, hard, kind of like it looks like a piece of chalk. And what you do is you take that in a little bit of water, and you scrape the stone across, or the ink across an inkstone. And the inkstone essentially will scratch off a little bit of the pigment or the ink out of the chalk that's been made out of the ash of the tree. This is where historians or some, ink experts are like, well, actually, and you know what? I welcome that. I want to learn more, but at the same time, like, don't hate me because I've probably messed that up. But then again, how many presentations of information have you had to give while you're also drawing and thinking about things? It's alright. No, but I remember thinking about that once because, so I've got this, it's under too much stuff right now. I might show it some other drawing. But I've got this kit that I use for Sumi ink painting, which is painting essentially with ink and water. And one of the things is that happens is, you got to make sure to keep your brush clean if you're going to be moving from one tone of ink to the other. And I was painting and I was making one type of texture, and I needed to clean my brush. I needed to wipe out the old ink that was on there, and I did so. Like I washed it in water, but in doing so, the bristles kind of frayed in a way that I didn't want them. I wanted to be sharp. And so what you normally do with a brush is like you've got one here, and then you just kind of like, you can take your tongue and kind of do that, or you can just lick it and then reform your brush. That's how I learned how to do it, because it's been a while. That one's been sitting over there and getting dusty. But the thing is I didn't think about what I was doing, and the ink, I had just dipped my brush in the ink after cleaning it, and so I just went, yeah. And I had ink in my mouth, so I go over to this sink and I'm spitting it out, and it looks terrible because I've got black ink all on my mouth and spitting into the sink. But the thing is, it had such an interesting flavor. Not that I would suggest ever trying that with ink, especially not India ink. I don't know if it's toxic or not, but I'm sure it's not good for you. I don't think the ink I ingested was any more good for me, but because it was like a Japanese sumi ink, it had been made from that tree, and so it tasted like ash, and it tasted like, you know, what burnt wood tastes like. Not that I've eaten burnt wood, but when you make a fire and you burn certain trees, you do get a flavor kind of in the air and in your mouth. And it was kind of like that. And it was kind of weird because I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I was telling people about that, and they're like, okay, that's great, but can we rewind back to the part where you willingly and knowingly stuck an ink brush into your mouth? I'm like, I didn't knowingly do it, I didn't mean to. I mean, I did. I just didn't think about it because I had been, painting for a while. So the moral of the story is don't eat your ink. It's not good for you. But it does have a flavor. But that doesn't mean you have to figure out what it is, because I just told you. Do as I say, not as I do. Since then, I have never accidentally eaten ink, or on purpose eaten ink, or consumed any of my art supplies in any way. I can't think of anything else that I would want to consume. Not that I wanted to consume ink. Oh my goodness. I keep trying to say, don't eat ink. It's not great. But like at the same time, like I'm also like, yeah, it had like this woody flavor and all that. No, don't do it. If you end up in the hospital, that's your own fault. Don't blame me. Alright, I want to put a stripe right here. I've had people, tell me that they're nervous about using dip pens because they're nervous about how many times, or they don't want to have to go back and dip back and forth all the time like you see so many times on TV or in jokes or whatever. And yeah, you do have to dip a bit. I wouldn't say it's as much as you usually see. Unless you're like me and you're just using a ton of ink. You're generally not gonna have to dip that much. Unless you're only like I've got it dipped about, when you use a dip pen, you only want to use about this much, so you don't want to go past these kind of, I don't know what they're called, like hooks here on the nib. You want to go about here, and as you work, the ink will dry on the nib. That's just going to happen. So that's why you want to keep a paper towel nearby so you can wipe off the excess ink. And I try to keep that paper towel moistened so that it doesn't completely bathe the pen. So then, it'll dilute the ink. But I also don't want it to just smear the ink goop all over the pen. I want it to be able to just kind of clean it off. I've heard of people that use pen cleaner. I don't like pen cleaner for as I work. I like it after I work. After I work, and I'll usually take all my nibs that I've used and I will put them in a container with a little bit of pen cleaner and just submerge them and soak them for about 30 minutes and then take them out and then wash them with a wet paper towel. And then dry them so that they do not rust, because they are metal and they will rust. But yeah, you want to keep in mind how much ink is on your nib, and you'll be able to feel it. As you get more used to using a nib, you will get used to feeling, okay, how freely is this ink coming off of the nib, or how much resistance am I getting? And sometimes you'll find also, like, if you look at the nib, you can see how much, ink is kind of pooled up in the curve of the nib itself. I personally don't really rely on that method because it's hard enough, first of all, to look at your nib and determine that. But also, like, I find that, like, sometimes I want dry, scratchy marks, which is something that you'll get as you run out of ink. So I try to just use what I've got on the nib, and then when I start feeling it get a little bit more resistant and a little bit more dry, I'll go to areas where I want those dry, scratchy marks, instead of just immediately either dipping or cleaning my nib and then dipping. But yeah, if you want to have a smooth drawing process, clean your nib after every dip. And by clean, I don't mean like just completely soak your nib and all of that. Just wipe it on a paper towel. Maybe have only half of it moistened and then use the other half to be dry and to dry off your nib, and then dip your pen in the ink and keep going. And make sure you're using the right kind of ink. India ink, I think, is the best, and make sure. I would highly recommend buying water soluble or water resistant. That way, if you decide to paint your piece, your ink won't run. And it's also good for, like, if you are using markers, like any moisture at all won't bother your ink. It means it's more permanent, but that's just ink for you. All right, he's kind of getting a little lost here in the moon, but don't worry, we're going to go in with the fills and darken up some of the shadow areas. You'll notice I'm not really that nervous about putting my hand on the work that I've done already. That's because this ink dries very quickly and this paper absorbs it quite well. If you're using cheaper paper, the paper will absorb it, but it'll only go so deep because the paper usually is just not, meant for liquid mediums. So it'll take a very long time for the ink to dry basically on top of the paper as opposed to getting absorbed. At least that's how I understand it. And so therefore you will have wet ink on your paper for a very long time. Whereas this paper, like this, is already dry. What the lines I just made here are already dry. That's because I'm using good old comic book board and some of the professional stuff that I've gotten before from Blue Line Art. That's the name of the company. I really like Blue Line Art. I'm not sponsored by them. I wish I was, because I would promote the heck out of their products. I've only ever bought paper from them, but they also have stuff for if you're doing hand-drawn animation. They've got stuff for if you want to do illustration work like this, where they sell comic book paper without any lines. They, of course, have comic book paper with blue lines on it so that you can do your pencils and all of that and have all your measurements on the paper to remind you where you want to stop and where you want to have your bleeds, like the comic book pros. And then when you go to scan it, those blue lines will not show up in the scan. Which is very, very handy. So Blue Line Pro, very, very good supplier of comic book and other art mediums equipment and needs. Would recommend. 10 out of 10 experience so far. And again, they're sold at good prices. Like, it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg. I bought about 100 sheets of comic book paper I think last month or so. And it did not cost me hardly as much as it would have cost me had I bought from any other retailer or any other place. And it's higher quality than if I had bought from any other retailer or any other place. So there's my commercial for Blue Line Pro. Blue Line Pro, call me. They're also like, okay, this is just for me. Just one more rant. Again, I don't rant about products unless I love them and use them myself. They're like actually one of their suppliers is very near. Like they're like basically like a state or two over. So for me, I can order and then have my stuff in at about a day. Now, that's not a perk that maybe all of you will get to enjoy. But if you live in United States, then you'll be able to, enjoy that perk as well. You'll note I'm not too keen on sharing where I live. Not that I care, it's just fun to josh around. Fun to make with the gifs and gabs. The kids and the cads. So you can see here the ink is kind of staining the inside of my my nib there. So I'm just taking my thumb and kind of running it on the inside and kind of smearing it out. And then I'm going to go in with my my moistened towel and kind of pull out any more that I can get on both sides and in the ridges as much as possible. And then I'll go in for another dip here. Again, only about that much ink. That's all you really need. Any more and it'll just fall off the pen. It'll kind of break the surface tension. And it'll also usually dry on the pen before you can get to it, which is unfortunate. If you need any more ink than that, get a different nib or get a brush and swap over to that for a little bit. So yeah, if you're working with a dip pen and you find that you're getting a lot of resistance and the ink is just not coming off, what I have found is usually that's indicative of like you haven't washed your nib in a while, or there's rust on your nib. So wash your nib, and then if it's still not working at that point, what you want to do is you want to make sure the ink that you're using is still fresh. So maybe pour a little bit more new ink in your inkwell. If it's still not working at that point, there might be something wrong with the nib itself. So I would look at your nib compared to a new nib and see if there's like any breaks or if there's any like rust spots. I'd guess if you're seeing like some stains that aren't coming out of the metal of the ink or of the nib, you're probably looking at some issues there where you might need to use more cleaner or longer soak times or something like that. Yeah, nibs aren't that hard to maintain. Like a lot of the problems I'm stating right here are things that I haven't really had happen. Like usually, like I have had nibs basically ruined just by me not cleaning them. And then I've been able to bring them back just by like cleaning them with like a cloth and some. Essentially, what nib cleaner is jewelry cleaner. So I use like something similar to that, and it cleans it right up, and I'm able to use it. So I haven't really had to buy a new nib in a while. I probably should, just because like I have been using the nibs quite a bit, and having spares is always a good idea. I say that just because I like art supply shopping. I am not one of those people that thinks that tools make the artwork. I truly do not, but I do also own a lot of tools and enjoy nerding out about tools or trying out new stuff. So, you know, case in point, I bought an airbrush one year just because, like, I had never tried painting with an airbrush before. And I love painting with that airbrush. It was totally worth it. But just like randomly one day I was like, I want an airbrush. And my colleagues and peers were like, why though? Nobody uses an airbrush. I'm like, yeah, but like, I kind of like the idea of being able to use it. And they're like, okay, you know, do whatever, I guess. And I did, and I got the airbrush and I started painting a lot of minis with it. And then one day I was like, oh, I wonder if I could do kind of like those old poster artists did using an airbrush. And I didn't quite get as good as those guys, but I did use the airbrush a little bit for my painting work. I'd like to try it again someday for maybe a landscape or something that's a little easier to work with. My music is gone. No, I must be entertained. I must be. There we go. Another 2 hours of music loaded up. I think the first one was only 45 minutes, and that's why I ran out. It's unacceptable. The bards must always play. If they do not, I will become enraged and kill the jester. There we go. Every now and then, what you want to do is you want to look at your work and kind of squint a little bit to see if the contrast is still showing. So what I mean by that is, like, does this look darker than our midground here? Does our background seem to be the lightest thing compared to our midground and our foreground? Or maybe your background is the darkest part, your midground is the lightest part. Either way, you want to have those kind of three elements in all of your illustration work, especially with pen and ink. If you've got a midground, background, and foreground element, you want all of those to be different tones. You want one to be dark, one to be darkest, and then one to be light. So you wanna medium, a light, and a dark. And that really does bring out some great contrast and some great pieces, regardless of if you're working with color or not. But especially with monochrome ink drawings like this, which will then be colored later. But just by doing the toning like this now, when I go to color this digitally, all of this will be already high contrast, and then I'll be able to enhance that more with the color. So all the stages need to bleed into each other. All right, let's go ahead. This. You'll notice off camera I actually added a little bit of white out here to add the kind of a little bit more roundness to this tentacle. And yeah, I think that's been the key to my success. Every time I record something, I'll shut the camera off and be like, all right, sweet, we'll finish that tomorrow. And then like 5 seconds later, I'll have done like 3 things on the illustration while the camera's off. It's nothing for it. It's just what happens. Eventually you will get to the point where the brush in your hand will feel like as easy as like having a Sharpie or a marker in your hand. It just takes time. Time and patience. And like I was telling somebody else who was in my friend group who, good friend of mine, very talented at art, wanted to try to get into doing some kind of inking style that they were looking at, and I told them, like, I gave them a great big long message about all of it because I get very excited about inking and I love talking about it. And I gave them like a ton of references and artists and, you know, books to pick up. One of the things I said was, you know, what you want to do when you get started is you want to practice with a ballpoint pen and do, you know, nothing but that ballpoint pen for a couple of weeks or a month. Then you want to, you know, if you want to get better at, you know, dry brushing and doing stuff like that, you want to just pick up a brush pen or, you know, brush and ink and do nothing but that for a week and a month. And by restricting yourself, you'll always find that it will suck to begin with, but you will get used to it. And that's the cool thing about the human body and the human mind. If you restrict it in some way, and if you, you know, put it in a tough spot, it will find a way to get better. It will find a way to learn. But so much of the time we just kind of run into the I don't want to, or the this is hard, or I'm not instantly good at this, so, you know, I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's not a criticism. That's something I run into a lot. It's like the reason why I don't like painting in acrylic or oil, because I am not good at it. I'm not instantly good at it, so I'm like, nope, not going to do it. But if I actually take my time and if I restrict myself, like I had to do a painting for a family member who had passed, and I was doing a commemorative painting of them, and it's like, it's just an oil painting because that's what's going to work the best for this. And it did, and I'm very proud of that painting. I'm very happy with how it turned out. I think it did all that it needed to do, and it honored that family member and was very nice for the family in mourning. And it's one of those things that you know, you have to, if you want to get better, you kind of have to force yourself to. Not in an oppressive way, not in a, if I don't get better, I'm not going to eat, or I don't go to sleep until it's, no. You're still going to keep your regular schedule. You're just going to set some you just want to set some time aside with your sketchbook, or maybe a few drawings or a few projects here and there, and just kind of try to learn something new and try to push yourself in a way that you haven't before. And, you know, sometimes that'll work. And sometimes you'll find out that, you know, maybe I need a bit more practice, or maybe I need to research a bit more. But eventually, you will get better. I remember when I was learning art, I was very bad about teaching myself because I had no one around to really show me how to be an artist, not in the way that I wanted to be an artist. I was very rough on myself, and I was very self-critical. And I also, like, I kind of denied myself a lot of the pleasure of learning. I would keep all of my drawings and I would go through them not to, see how I improved, but to see how bad I was. And I would go through those drawings almost on a weekly or a monthly basis and show myself, oh, you're still not there. You're still not there. And it was rough. I was very rough on myself. So I know what it's like to struggle, especially when picking up a new medium or trying a new thing. And especially for artistic people, because artistic people are like very, very, they're very self-critical. But they're also very talented. So sometimes we're used to, as artists, just being good at something, and then like when we're not instantly, it's like, well, must not be worth doing. I hate it. Done that so many times, and I've heard that so many times. So I know it's not just me that feels that way. And if you feel that way, it's not just you that feels that way. Plenty of us are exactly the same way about stuff like that. Alright. This is turning out pretty okay. I need to bite the bullet and do this sword here. There we go. Might increase the contrast up here a little bit. All right. You'll see me a lot of times do this. When I lean back like this, I'm not just thinking, I'm also looking at, what I'm about to do, and I'm making a decision. But I'm also trying to move back and see what I'm doing, because so much of the time you'll get focused and stuck in one area, and that's not good. You want to be able to have a view of the entire piece, so that you don't overdo one area, or you don't, underdo something, or you don't miss something. So here I'm just kind of leaning back. I'm checking, okay, I did this area, I did that area. What else needs to be done? What doesn't look right? What could use a little more spiffing up? And I think I'm overall happy. I'm going to try to get this sword done here. Let me get this out and let me turn this around. Well, that was downright relaxing. For me, at least. Just that one pleasantly arcing curve there. Do that, and then add some shading here. Might have gone a little heavy on the face, but that's alright. Alright, I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna let it sit for about 30-40 minutes or so, and just to make sure everything's dry. It usually doesn't take 30 minutes, but I like to just be sure. And then I'm gonna erase everything, all the pencil, all the excess stuff, just to see if there's anything I've missed. And we'll go over and do some of the final stuff, maybe some whiteout, and we should be ready to call this one done very, very soon. So I'll be done right now-ish, right after these messages, right after this next clip, whatever. Alright then, so I should have been needing this. I didn't, so I've got to need my kneaded eraser just a wee bit before we get to actually erasing this. Now, what happens every time I ink is I always forget something. And usually it's something that I did in the penciling stage that turned out okay. So, like this right here that I just noticed. Whoop, there we go. What I like to do to check everything before I scan in my drawing and call it finished and start the coloring process and the sending it off to the client and telling them, oh, it looks done, and then realizing that I missed something, I like to go through and I like to erase everything. So I've got my kneaded eraser, which should be a little kinder to our drawing. If there's any remaining active spots from our inking, hopefully won't smudge anything. I don't think we will. I'm just going to go around in a nice circular motion and try to get rid of all the pencil. Now, if you're like me and you draw nice and light, I say like me. If you're like the good version of me that takes his own advice and actually draws lightly in the pencil stage, this should come up pretty easily. But if you're also like me and sometimes forget this and draw maybe a little bit too hard, or maybe with a bit more rigorous penciling, you might have to go through with a rubber eraser. Now I suggest using, where's the version of this that's in its package? I don't have it. I suggest getting a rubber eraser like this. It's a nice soft variety, so it you should have a little bit of flex. What brand is this? I had like a package. It's on my list. Hold on. It's on my supply list because I recommend it a lot. Hold on. I love doing this in the middle of recording. It's great. Arsenal supplies. I am using a... It's not on my supply list. Well, it will be by the end of this video. So it's not on there now, but I will put it on there by the end of this video. But you want to use a nice rubber eraser that isn't harsh and isn't too hard. You want it to have a little bit of give in it so that when you're pushing up against the paper, it doesn't just tear your paper or tear into your ink or anything else that you're wanting to do. Now this kneaded eraser I got already used. I found it on the floor in my room where I was teaching. So my classroom, which was actually the kitchen of the church we were using. Those are the facilities given us to teach, or me to teach at least. I'm already spotting something here I want to address real quickly. There we go. Somebody had left it, and I asked my students if anybody recognized it, anybody wanted it, because it was like 2 or 3 kneaded erasers squashed together. It was very, very well used and very kind of dirty, so I've been needing it for a while. But I used it in the class for a bit, and then I've been using it ever since, because mine is like, it was lost for a long time and I couldn't find it. When I did find it, it was rock hard and I didn't want to need it, so it wound up getting thrown out. But I suggest using a kneaded eraser because it's a lot softer and a lot more forgiving. Alright. Swapping over to rubber eraser. There we go. Well, that's helped already get the moon looking a little bit more like it's in the background. Because you can see how little I've shaded the moon as opposed to everything else. Honestly, I'm not seeing too much here that needs to be fixed, and that's good. Some of those get out of the way. Let me just look a little bit at this. And I'll sometimes break out the brush pen. Other times I'll just use the micron pens if I'm just doing little touch-ups like up here. Let me strengthen the outline here. Go. All right. I think I kind of want to say that I think we've got it. As soon as I do, I'll see 5 more things, so I think we've got it. Honestly, I'm kind of happy about how this turned out. I hope that you agree and aren't screaming at your screen right now to fix something that I can't see. It'd be most unfortunate. So I can't do anything about that. By the time you see this, hopefully this will be off to Chris. So let me see here if I can get this one little line here. A little more generous than I would have liked it, but that's okay. few dabs here and there with good old whiteout. And don't let anybody tell you that whiteout is just, cheating or makes your art less. Professionals use whiteout, so you can use whiteout too. Now don't overly rely on it to the point where you're making mistakes left and right and just, you don't learn from them. But at the same time, it's whiteout. It's readily available at any craft store. Craft or office supply store. There we go. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write this one done. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to find a corner here, put my signature, and I want to thank you all for watching, hanging out with me for a couple hours, watching me ink this piece. Really happy with it. I'm super excited to send this off to Chris. Super excited to color it first, of course. So, stay tuned for that. I'll be recording that process as well. But for now, here's our inked Chris Comedy's Pirate, or with the Kraken. I think I'll just call it the Kraken rather than Chris Comedy's Pirate. But there we go. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this a lot. I hope that it was a nice, relaxing video to put on and maybe watch a couple hours while you have a snack and maybe a nice tea or coffee. And I hope that you went out and made your own creative project. And I hope that you continue being creative. So I'm going to be making more videos like this, and hopefully you'll keep enjoying them. And until next time, go make something awesome.